What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com.
Here are my DFS picks for NFL Week 2. Final look.
These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button
And hit that bell icon
so you don't miss our new videos.
In this video, I'm going to go over my top picks for this week's NFL slate. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Okay guys, NFL Week 2. Let's take a look at the quarterback position. So at the quarterback position here, stud on the slate, you gotta take a look at Patrick Mahomes from the Kansas City Chiefs, playing the Jacksonville Jaguars, who have a good defense overall, but they give up the third most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. And Patrick Mahomes has averaged 20.5 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 6 rush attempts per game. He's going to be about 8% owned, projected at 23.2 fantasy points here in week 2. He's projected at 23.2 fantasy points here in week 2, and his 8,300 DraftKings salary, 51 fantasy points on FanDuel. They got the Kansas City Chiefs favored by 3.5. So you got a high scoring game and a close competitive game. Oh, he's 8,300 on DraftKings. He's 700 more on FanDuel. Sorry for the choppy start to this video, but we're going to get into this video. We're going to have some fire picks for you here in week 2. So Patrick Mahomes, stud pick. That one's obvious. But let's move on here at the quarterback position. I like Justin Fields from the Chicago Bears, playing the Tampa Bay Bucks, who have the 8th worst defense overall, give up the 10th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Now, Justin Fields, he averaged 16.5 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 9 rush attempts per game. He's only going to be about 2% owned, and he's projected at 19.1 fantasy points here in week 2. He's 7,600 DraftKings salary, only 400 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 40.5 points scored in this game, with the Bears trailing by 2.5. So I like Justin Fields here versus the Tampa Bay Bucks. Now I also like Josh Allen and Justin Herbert, but if you're looking to save some salary here at the quarterback position, take a look at Baker Mayfield from the Tampa Bay Bucks. He's playing the Chicago Bears, who have the 2nd worst defense overall, give up the 2nd most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Baker Mayfield, he is averaging 16 fantasy points per game on the season. He got 8 rush attempts in week 1, gonna be about 5% owned, projected at 15.9 fantasy points here in week 2. Only 5,100 DraftKings salary, 1,700 more on FanDuel. We know Vegas thinks there's going to be 40.5 points scored in this game, with the Bucks favored by 2.5. So I think this is a good pick here if you want to save some salary. Fantastic. And I like that he got 8 rush attempts in week 1. You got that rushing upside. So I like Baker Mayfield here versus the Chicago Bulls or the Chicago Bears. Okay, let's take a look at the running back position. So, of course, you got Christian McCaffrey, stud pick on the slate. But if you want to come down in salary for a stud pick who I think can match the production of McCaffrey this week, take a look at Bijan Robinson from the Atlanta Falcons, playing the Green Bay Packers, who have the 11th worst defense overall, give up the 8th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Bijan Robinson, he's averaging 20.3 fantasy points per game on the season, got 10 rush attempts in week 1, but he also got 6 pass attempts, going to be about 7% owned, projected at 15.5 fantasy points here in week 2. He's 7,900 DraftKings salary, 200 more on FanDuel. So he put up 20 fantasy points in week 1. Good matchup here. So I like Bijan Robinson here versus the Green Bay Packers. Okay, everyone, it's time to announce the winner of our $25 weekly PayPal giveaway. And the winner is Mr. Superthawed. Mr. Superthawed, congratulations. You are the winner of this week's $25 PayPal giveaway. Please reply to our comment to collect your prize.
Before I continue with the picks, I'm excited today because we added a new contest for everyone watching.
If you want to enter the drawing for $25 PayPal,
all you need to do is like this video, hit that subscribe button, and make a quick comment below to be entered into the drawing. We'll reply to a random comment and let you know that you won.
And we'll send you $25 PayPal.
So it's that easy, and we pick a new winner every Saturday and announce them in our video. So get your comment in now so I can add another entry for you.
Okay, some other running backs on the slate that I like. You got Tony Pollard, Derrick Henry. And actually, I would probably play Derrick Henry over Bijan Robinson. You could save a little bit of salary with this pick on DraftKings. Derrick Henry from the Tennessee Titans playing the LA Chargers, who have the worst defense overall, give up the 12th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Now, Derrick Henry scored 13.9 fantasy points in week 1. He got 15 rush attempts and 3 pass targets. Now, he's only on the field for 48% of the snaps. A little bit concerning, but he did get close to 20 touches. He's going to be about 14% owned. Looking for a bounce back game and quite a bit more volume. So he's projected at 16.9 fantasy points here in week 2, 7,400 DraftKings salary, 900 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 45.5 points scored in this game. They have the Titans trailing by 2.5. So I like Derrick Henry here versus the LA Chargers. Now, another stud pick that I like, even though he's not being ranked as a stud right now, he's a mid-range play, but I think he will move his way up to the top salary on the slate by the end of the season. So I like Travis Etienne from the Jacksonville Jaguars playing the Kansas City Chiefs, who have the 12th worst defense overall, give up the 10th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Travis Etienne, averaging 21.4 fantasy points per game on the season, got 18 rush attempts and 5 pass targets in week 1, so tons of volume, was on the field for 80% of the snaps, going to be about 9% owned. I think he's going under owned here in week 2, just like he was in week 1. And Vegas thinks there's going to be 51 points scored in this game with the Jacksonville Jaguars trailing by 3.5. So Travis Etienne, 6,900 DraftKings salary, 1,300 more on FanDuel. So I like Travis Etienne here versus the Kansas City Chiefs. So you got a lot of good quarterbacks on the slate this week. You got James Conner, David Montgomery, Kenneth Walker, Tyler Algier. All those guys, 5,500 to 6,200 DraftKings salary. So, and all those guys have pretty good matchups and had pretty decent week 1s. So, lots of running backs on the slate to pick from. So, let's take a look at the wide receiver position. So, the stud on the slate that I like is Amon-Ra St. Brown from the Detroit Lions playing the Seattle Seahawks, who have the 3rd worst defense overall, give up the 7th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Amon-Ra St. Brown has averaged 19.1 fantasy points per game on the season. He's getting an average of 9 pass targets per game, which is good because he averaged 9 pass targets per game last year, started off the season with 9 pass targets in week 1. Going to be about 17% owned, was on the field for 94% of the snaps. He's 7,800 DraftKings salary, 300 more on FanDuel, projected at 16.9 fantasy points here in week 2.
Vegas thinks there's going to be 47 points scored in this game, with the Lions favored by 4.5. So I like Amon-Ra St. Brown here versus the Seattle Seahawks. Now I also like Calvin Ridley from the Jacksonville Jaguars playing the Kansas City Chiefs, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. They give up the 9th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Calvin Ridley scored 27.1 fantasy points in week 1 off of 11 pass targets. Going to be about 17% owned, on the field for 81% of the snaps. Projected at 15.9 fantasy points here in week 2. He's $7,200 DraftKings salary, $1,100 more on FanDuel. We know Vegas thinks there's going to be 51 points scored in this game, with the Jaguars trailing by 3.5. So it could be a good passing game script for Calvin Ridley playing Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. So I like Calvin Ridley here versus the Kansas City Chiefs. Now another wide receiver that I like on the slate is Keenan Allen from the LA Chargers playing the Tennessee Titans, who have the 9th worst defense overall, give up the 2nd most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Now Keenan Allen averaged 14.2 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 9 pass targets per game, 2 rush attempts per game. Going to be about 16% owned, was on the field for 91% of the snaps in week 1. He's projected at 15.9 fantasy points here in week 2. $7,100 DraftKings salary, $700 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 45.5 points scored in this game. Got the Chargers favored by 2.5. So I like Keenan Allen in a great matchup here versus the Tennessee Titans.
Real quick guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all the tools for NFL. This is a great time to get in and try everything for 1 month. The tools are all about saving research time. You can see the last 3 games, the fantasy points per game, the targets they got per game, so you can see how involved they are in the offense, the rushes they got per game. Seeing all this stuff on one screen helps you save time and make better picks. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups.
Now coming down in salary here, I like Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Mike Williams. If you don't want to go with Keenan Allen, you got Mike Williams in that same game at only $5,700 DraftKings salary, $1,000 more on FanDuel. So he's a salary saving option, scored 9 fantasy points in week 1 off of 5 pass targets. Going to be about 10% owned. Now coming down in salary even more here, take a look at Nico Collins from the Houston Texans playing the Indianapolis Colts, who have the 6th worst defense overall, give up the 5th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Nico Collins scored 14 fantasy points in week 1 off of 11 pass targets, on the field for 70% of the snaps, going to be about 8% owned, projected at 10.8 fantasy points here in week 2. He's $4,800 DraftKings salary, $1,400 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 39.5 points scored in this game. Got the Texans favored by 1. So a big 11 pass target game in week 1. Sitting at only $4,800 DraftKings salary, $1,400 more on FanDuel. And a great matchup. So I like Nico Collins here versus the Indianapolis Colts. Okay, moving on to the tight end position. Nothing that stands out on the slate for me here, so I'm just going to give you a handful of picks. I like Tyler Higbee, Cole Kmet. I like Sam Laporta, Zach Ertz, Luke Musgrave, Logan Thomas. So there is a handful of tight ends, but the one that I think that I like the most might be Zach Ertz from the Arizona Cardinals playing the New York Giants, who have the 12th worst defense overall. They were good versus opposing tight ends. Zach Ertz, though, he scored 8.1 fantasy points in week 1 off of 10 pass targets, was on the field for 77% of the snaps. He's going to be about 8% owned, projected at 7.6 fantasy points here in week 2. Now, I like this pick because he's only $3,500 DraftKings salary, $1,400 more on FanDuel, so he looks underpriced. Vegas thinks there's going to be 39.5 points scored in this game. They have the Cardinals trailing by 4. So I do think this is going to be a good game for Zach Ertz. 10 pass targets in week 1. Hard to pass him up at only $3,500 DraftKings salary. So I like Zach Ertz here versus the New York Giants. Let's go over one more player here. If I didn't play Zach Ertz, looks like the highest ownership player is Luke Musgrave from the not the Golden State, my goodness, from the Green Bay Packers, playing the Atlanta Falcons, who have a good defense over. Oh my gosh, the Atlanta Falcons playing the Atlanta Falcons, who have a good defense overall. They give up the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Luke Musgrave scored 8 fantasy points in week 1 off of 4 pass targets. Now, he was on the field for 75% of the snaps, going to be about 12% owned, projected at 7.1 fantasy points here in week 2. He's only $3,200 DraftKings salary, $1,800 more on FanDuel. Now, he has a better matchup on paper than does Zach Ertz, and he is $300 cheaper. But Vegas only thinks there's going to be 40 points scored in this game. They have the Packers trailing by 1.5. Now, it is good. It is a good tight end matchup. So I do like Luke Musgrave here versus the Atlanta Falcons. But I think I would go with Zach Ertz for just $300 more on DraftKings. It looks like he's same price or even $100 cheaper on FanDuel. So I like Zach Ertz and Luke Musgrave.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smiggity smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite
Player for this NFL slate.
I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again and good luck.